bones and all the downstream side effects of that. So Dr. Wolf says, well, we know that bones adapt to this compressive stress, but he also realized that the biggest source of stress is our skeletal muscles. So when let's give you your femur back, Don, and we'll let you, but let's take Debbie's upper arm or humerus bone and let's clip the bicep tendon at the bottom of her arm and see what happens. What we would immediately see is that bicep would sort of ratchet up like a shade would. If I pulled on a shade quickly and how it snaps up quickly to the top of the window, the same thing would happen. If you've ever seen anyone with a torn bicep, you'll see that the bicep goes up like this into a little ball almost. And so there's constant stress on tendons which attach the muscle to the bone. So the tendon and the muscle, think of it as a rubber band that we're stretching and then sort of taping to the bone, and if I remove that tape, it snaps back. So we call that recoiling of the muscle. So there's this constant stress from your muscles, David, and if I have bigger, stronger muscles, there's more pulling. And if I have smaller, weaker muscles, there's less pulling. So we can generate this 24-hour-a-day stress to your bones without having to jump off blocks, without having to go jogging. I mean, nothing wrong with jogging, but for a lot of us, that's very hard on our bodies for a lot of reasons, and one of those is our skeleton, of course. So muscle is highly correlated to bone osteoblast activity. Why? Because we're producing stress to the skeleton. And any structural protein like that responds by saying, let me prepare for the next stress. Again, this happens in all human organisms and any live organism, period. So, you with me so far? Bones adapt to stress. Muscles generate 24-hour-a-day stress on the bone. Bigger, stronger muscles create more pulling, more compressive stress. Smaller, weaker muscles produce less compressive stress. Now, we could do this, Claudia. We could say, hey, what also produces stress if I go up 4 feet and jump down on the ground and do, we might call that a box jump, that produces a ton of compressive force on the spine and the hips and the pelvis and so on. But what's the problem with that activity? If we said, pardon me? Injury. Yes, 9 out of 10 times you're going to have an injury in someone who's over 50. Now that's great if you're 20, 25, 30, you can get away with it. You're pretty much bulletproof. But even at 55 today, there's no way I can do a box jump like that without incurring multiple injuries to my back and my hips and my knees. So we have to find a way, Diane, to generate the stimulus, but to do it safely. And that is, of course, by making your muscles stronger. So we have this 24-hour-a-day automatic osteoblast stimulator switch going, okay? So Wolff's Law was just a discovery of normal human physiology that we weren't aware of. And you can read about it in any medical textbook, any physiology textbook, but it's an important concept in bone health. Now, it was 1983, and a group of scientists said, hey, we understand this Wolff's Law thing. We have women. They had a group of osteoporotic women. This was at the University of Florida School of Medicine. A group of osteoporotic women in Frank, and they said, well, let's strength train them, but the downside to strength training women with osteoporosis is their bones are fragile to begin with. So you can't say, hey, Frank, we got a great workout. You might fracture your hip during the workout, but we're going to try to make you healthy. That, of course, is a disaster in action for anyone. So you have to say, how do I strengthen the muscles, make them stronger to take advantage of Wolff's Law without killing them, literally killing them in the workout? So that's where this sort of project picks up. A group of scientists said, hey, let's play around with some different protocols and see what we can do. And they basically stumbled upon this slow motion training method, which is exactly what we use today. In fact, the birth of the 10-10, it's called super slow strength training. The birth of the 10-10 protocol, David, was at the University of Florida. From that came standardization around the protocol and the use of it throughout the United States as well as the world. And so the beautiful thing here is that they discovered that by moving almost you know, it is super slow. It's slow motion, isn't it? For those of us who do it, we know it. There's minimal velocity, Frank, so there's almost no force on the bone other than the fact that we're stimulating the muscles intensely as we move slowly. And that allows us to train, Claudia, without exceeding the fracture threshold. This is the sort of cut point where if you go above that fracture threshold, you essentially have a fractured bone at some level. And so we have clients who've shared stories with us about people who were working out and ended up with compression fractures and other fractures in their body because why? The workouts are exceeding the fracture threshold of the bone. So once you get to a point where you have lost a lot of bone, it doesn't take much to break a bone. It really doesn't. In fact, there's a term called fragility fracture, which simply means you could literally bump your shoulder against the wall and fracture your humerus because your bones are so brittle and thin. So the point being that this study basically, in an attempt to say, let's get a safe way to train people, sort of was the birthplace of the 10-10 training protocol. And of course, that we do that today. As you know, we do that today. We all do that. We've also created recently some new techniques building on that, which I'll talk about, that are even safer than 10-10. They're very challenging to the muscle, David, but they're even safer. So they stimulate the muscle at a very high level with literally no movement at all. So it's a great way to get stronger while keeping the bones 110% safe. So we've said that we're constantly building and losing bone. We have this natural bone building system that we can access by using Wolff's Law and building our muscles so that they pull and put compressive force on the bones all the time. And then the Nautilus Osteoporosis Project realizes that, hey, we can actually strength train women and do something about this. And by the way, that was the issue back in the 80s. It was a scientist at Tufts University, Bill Evans, Dr. Bill Evans, did some of the initial work to discover that, hey, Marianne, no matter how old she is, if we train her hard, her muscles get stronger. So we call this muscle responsiveness. Do you guys remember years ago when the idea of strength training for senior citizens was to sort of lift a soup can and do this and do 5 repetitions with a soup can? Nothing wrong with soup cans. I like soup cans, but they're not heavy enough to stimulate the muscle enough to fatigue it to get a benefit from it. So for years we believed that, oh, seniors can't build muscle and they shouldn't try because nothing works. When in fact what we were doing, undertraining them. We weren't working them hard enough. Paradoxically, Grandma needs to train as hard as Johnny does. Now she needs to do it